I just want to quickly mention as well, to tag on to what Pastor Jen just said, our annual meeting is on the 1st, but our elections are that morning. So we'll have a ballot for our church board and our district assembly delegates that morning. And anyone who's a member and at least 15 years old can vote that morning, and we'll have ballots upstairs. So just want to make sure you know that as well. As Pastor Jen also said, we started a new series last week called How to Rebuild Your Life. And we started with Nehemiah. And we began with him being in Persia, working as a cupbearer to the king when he hears about the walls of Jerusalem being in ruins around the city. He is currently in exile on the tail end of that, one of the major stories of the Old Testament. And he has very little power. He is just the cupbearer of the king. The cupbearer of the king is just someone who sips the wine before the king to make sure that there's no poison in it. This is a lowly position. It's a disposable position. And yet, Nehemiah gets this God-given dream that he is going to go back to his home out of exile with no power to do so. He's going to need a lot of miracles to happen to even get back to Jerusalem. And so he begins to pray. With no power, he begins to pray. Now, often we can get in a posture, in a position that we tell ourselves that life is happening to us. We don't see how we have any authority over life, any power, any way that we can make anything happen. Things on the outside are happening to us. Other people get breaks. I get no help whatsoever. Nehemiah could be this person. There's already people who have made it back to Jerusalem. Exile is over in so many ways. The wall around Jerusalem could be someone else's problem. Who is he, after all, to take this on upon himself? And so we're going to talk today about his next steps of heading back towards Jerusalem. In fact, by the end of our sermon today, he'll be back in Jerusalem. But 2 chapters in, the work still will not have begun. I want to talk a little bit about the way in which we tackle difficult things, the way in which we think about difficult things, if we could. And first, I want to do so by telling you the story of a race I used to run in Maine. This race was called the Beach to Beacon 10K, and literal Olympians would run this race. Now, I want to tell you how I used to run the race as well, but to tell you how lowly I was, they put all the Olympians up front, and they shot a gun off and only let them run, and then they made this corral of felt like cows, just wait until the actual runners got going, right? And so the race was called the Beach to Beacon because it would begin near a beach and it would end at Portland Headlight, which I have a picture of for you. This is the most photographed, I believe, building in the United States of America. At the very least, the most photographed lighthouse. This is right outside of Portland, Maine. Have you ever heard of Henry Wadsworth Longfellow? He wrote, I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day, the Christmas song. He would also walk here from Portland to write poetry about this in the 1800s. So you can see it's a beautiful, picturesque lighthouse. And this is right about where the race would end. And so they marked out 10 kilometers from there, and you ran to this beacon. And for the most part, it was the edge of Maine, so, it's flat. Just a little light rolling hill, nothing very serious, until at the very end you would turn into Fort Williams Park. And at this point you've run about 6 miles, and so you might imagine you're tired unless you're one of those people that got to run first. I was in the tired bunch. And when you would go into the park, you would think to yourself, okay, I've only got about a quarter to a third of a mile left. I can make this. Except it was all uphill the last quarter to a third mile to get to the beacon. And so after 6 miles, you're thinking, I'm going to make it. And then all of a sudden, the hill comes. And you start going up that hill, and you're like, who designed this stupid course? That's exactly what you're thinking in your mind at this point. Who did this to me? There's one thing to decide you're going to sign up for a race in May when the registration opens. It's another thing to be running uphill the last quarter of a mile. It's miserable. And so, as you're running uphill, you're starting to think, this is the longest quarter mile I've run all day. And then the last little stretch, not even a tenth of the mile, you turn around and you see the finish line, and you're just dragging up this hill, and everyone around you is dragging as well. But when you turn the last corner, you see this plot of grass in the finish line, and every single person, most every single person, I'm talking like 98% of people, all of a sudden sprint. You see the end, you're dead tired, and all of a sudden, upon seeing the finish line, everyone starts running like it's a football play, just all out towards the finish line. And almost every person is crossing it at the fullness of their speed. Where does that energy come from? I mean, literally, you go from thinking, I am an idiot for signing up for this race, I am going to collapse, to everyone sprinting. There's something psychological about seeing a finish line. There's something psychological about nearly having accomplished your goals. And there's also something psychological about being in the middle or in the hard part of trying to accomplish your goals. I want to tell you the story about a couple of psychologists. Before we do that, it's important to ask ourselves, how do we measure how we are doing? How do we measure how we are doing? In this story I just told you, do I measure the story when I'm running uphill in the last quarter mile, or do I measure it when I finish? At any point in a long race, you could ask yourself how you're doing and decide whether or not you're winning in lots of different ways. Take a race like I just described. Do you score yourself when you sign up? That's a pretty big deal, right? To decide I'm actually going to get myself in shape for a long race. That's a pretty big deal. Do you decide you're doing good when you actually wake up that morning and get in line? It's one thing to sign up for it in May, it's another thing to show up at 7 in the morning. Do you score yourself, do you tell yourself you're doing good when you're actually running and really tired, but keep going? Do you decide whether or not you've done a good job when you finish? I actually made it to the end. Doesn't matter how I got here, but I did it. Or do you decide whether or not you're doing well when you go up to the board at the end of the race and they show you what your time was? Did I meet my goal? Was I worse than my goal? Did I do a good job pursuing a goal, right? There's all sorts of ways we can measure ourselves in life. So about those psychologists, this is Clark Hull. You've probably never heard of him before. He taught at Yale University. He's a behavioral psychologist. And he wanted to know about how we think about goals. And so he did his studies using mice. And I hate to compare us to mice, but psychiatrists, psychologists, they do this all the time, right? If mice do it, this must be how humans work as well. And so he created these mazes for mice, and he wanted to observe how they ran the race in a maze. And so he would create these new mazes, and he would take the mice and he'd shove them in the front end, and he would observe how they did. And without fail, no matter what mouse was put in there, they started out tentatively and scared. This is a new environment. What's the goal? Where am I going? How do I get out of here? Am I trapped forever? And they would move really slowly until they began to realize what the environment was that they were in. And once the mouse realized that they weren't in danger and that there was a goal, they would slowly start speeding up. And the closer and closer they got to the end, the more frantic their activity would be, but they knew they were getting close to the end. And they thought, well, that's really interesting. Behavior seems to be that when we want to enter into change, we do so tentatively. We do so with fear, with trembling. But as we begin to realize what our goal is and how close we are to the goal, we pick up steam and energy and joy, and we work harder and harder and harder because we can see the goal. Oftentimes, our struggle is in the middle spot. Once we know we're going to survive this new change, but we can't see the end, that's where humans often struggle. We kind of like start with fight or flight. Are we going to be okay? Oh, I am okay in this little change. But if I'm trying to lose 10 pounds, I can't get over the 5th pound mark. I'm just stuck. If we're trying to clean our house every single day rather than leaving it as a mess. Oh, it's a mess again today. I've got to do it again. I just did this yesterday. Why doesn't anyone pick up? We get caught in the middle most often. The middle is where we struggle. When we're actually almost to the goal, we speed up, we have energy. When we begin, we're tentative, but we're trying to feel our way out. It's the middle that's a struggle. And so a professor of marketing came along and did a similar test, but different, this time with humans. And what he wanted to do was to show a human a series of long words. This is him, Andrea Bonezzi, teaches at New York University. And he kept asking them, show me a smaller word in this longer word. And so I found a long word for you. Sesquipedalian. Sesquipedalian. That just means you're fond of long words. Do you see a word in that word? Yeah? What's the word you see? Quip. Yeah, equip, quip. Yeah, right, there you go. So what he did is he showed them a long word like this. And all of you think to yourself, I'm really good at this. I saw a word right away. And then he'll show them another word and another word and another word. And with each word that comes along, every single person that did it got bored. By the time they were at the 6th or 7th, they're like, what is this dude doing to me? And their response got slower and slower, and the words weren't getting harder or easier. We just get bored. It's one thing to be given a challenge. Like all of us are like, oh, I see a word. I'm smart. But by the time you get a 6th or 7th word put in front of your face, you're like, what is even the point of this? Now you can see how the psychology works, right? I want to rebuild my life. I want to do something new. I want to reach a goal. I want to get out of this rut. I want to feel and experience victory. We can get excited to get started. I've got a goal. But actually, the hard work of the day-to-day, the step-by-step, gets boring and difficult so very fast. So let's remind ourselves of Nehemiah again. Nehemiah wants to build this wall in Jerusalem. This picture, this is Nehemiah's dream and goal. But he is sitting in Susa in Persia in a pretty unflattering job. He is stuck. He can't just go to HR and quit. He's got this dream, the wall around the city he loves, his hometown, the place where the glory of God is supposed to live. It lies in ruins. So how is he going to make this a reality, this God-given dream? He's not making this up. He's not coming up with his own ideas of what he wants to do. He believes that God has planted this goal and dream and plan on his heart and his life. So how is he going to get from here, cupbearer to the king in Susa, working for a king that has no stake whatsoever in this wall? How is he going to get from here to there? Think about all of the challenges that Nehemiah is going to have along the way. To get to this God-given dream of building a wall is not going to be easy. The barriers look like this. Cost. Who's going to pay for it? Walls don't come free. Location. He's got to get hundreds of miles from here to there. There's going to be opposition that comes upon this wall. The powers that be around Jerusalem don't want a wall around Jerusalem because it protects Jerusalem. And so other nations are going to be mad that he wants to fortify this once great city. He might think to himself, I'm stuck where I am. I'm powerless. I can't do anything. He might get himself into a state of comparison. Why did I have to get sent out to exile? Why are all the other cities not having this problem? Why did God seem to leave these other nations alone? Their walls aren't torn down. Why is it we have to pay for the sins of the past generation. Man, Persia sure has it great, don't they? Look at all the money and power and influence. Look at the walls around the cities here. Why is it that my city is the one that fell into ruin? And also loneliness. Anytime you have a God-given dream and you're the first one to see it, it can feel so lonely when you're pursuing something that God has called you to, and no one else seems to want to get on board. So what does Nehemiah do with all of these excuses, all of these problems laying in front of him? We're going to continue into Nehemiah chapter 2, and we're going to just read 10 verses today, the first half of this chapter. And I invite you, if you would, to stand with me as we honor the reading of the word of the Lord today. Nehemiah chapter 2, verses 1 to 10. In the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked me, "Why does your face look so sad when you are not ill?" That's a rough question to get asked. Why is your face that way? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire?" The king said to me, "What is it you want?" Then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city of Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it." Then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, asked me, "How long will your journey take, and when will you get back?" It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. I also said to him, "If it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah? And may I have a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the royal park? So he will give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, by the temple, and for the city wall, for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my requests. So I went to the governors of Trans-Euphrates and gave them the king's letters. And the king had also sent army officers and cavalry with me. When Sanballat, the Horonite, and Tobiah, the Ammonite official, heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. You may be seated. What an incredible story this is. I want you to listen to the emotions of Nehemiah first and foremost. He tells us, "I had not been sad in the king's presence before." He is at a tough point in dreaming. He sees the problem clearly. And he also knows the solution is outside of his power, his wealth, his control. That's a hard place to be. To see the goal and to not have the means to get there. And so his emotions make sense. He's sad. He's overwhelmed. He's broken. And the king notices that he's sad. And so when the king asks him, "Hey, what's wrong? Why are you so sad? What's going on?" Nehemiah tells us as an aside. He doesn't tell the king this. He just lets us know, as if we have box seats into his story to come up close and to witness. He says, "I was very much afraid." I think sometimes when I read the scripture, I make the assumption that these are like saints. These are heroes. They aren't burdened by the same sort of fears that I have. They're better, stronger, more impressive than I am. And he turns to us and he says, "I was terrified. I knew what I was about to ask was way more than I deserved. I was afraid. I was looking power and wealth and opportunity straight in the face, and I felt small. I was very much afraid, he said. And so he lays out this plan, but he does so knowing that he's asking for a lot. And the king says, "What is it that you want?" And so the king seems open to helping Nehemiah, which is a great first step. The king could have just said, "Dude, your job is to make sure I don't die. Get it together and come back tomorrow." He could have said that. But Nehemiah has been a good citizen, a good helper, a good servant. And so the king wants to help this person who's been good to him. He says, "What is it that you want?" And what we're told again should be shocking to us. Nehemiah lays out an audacious plan. But before he gets there, he tells us again. He's not telling the king this, he's telling us. Before I laid out my audacious plan, I prayed. Now, remember, last week was a whole long prayer. It was an incredible prayer of confession before God. But the one-time prayer isn't all that Nehemiah does. He prays continually. And so even before he brings the plan to the king that he's already sorted out in his prayer room with God, he prays again. He keeps praying. He prayed and then he asked. And we're told last chapter, leading into this, that he had not told anyone what God had put on his heart. And so this is a huge movement in the story. Nehemiah has been holding on to this dream, this call, this belief of what could be, but he's held it to himself. It has been his story and his story alone. And now we start seeing this unveiling of how it is going to work out. He goes from not telling anyone to starting to slowly tell the story. I had not told anyone what God had put on my heart. And then as the story comes on, past where we have read today, moving on into the later part of the chapters, Nehemiah says, "You see the trouble we are in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. I told them about the gracious hand of God on me and what the king had said to me." And so he's starting now to move from not telling anyone to telling the king, to going back to Jerusalem with the help of the king, and he's beginning to tell others about what the burden is in his own life. And this is a huge change in the text, and it's an important story for us to understand. When we want to change something, when we want to rebuild our life, when God has called us something, when we want to take a next step, it's so often what we do is we hold on to the story in our own mind, in our own heart, because we are afraid to put it out there. If God has called us to something big and we start telling people and then we don't do it, we look like a failure. And so what often happens with us is we get overwhelmed and we get caught in the middle and we hold the story to ourselves. But among the things that does is put pressure on me as an individual to do this whole thing by myself. And the story of Nehemiah 2 is that Nehemiah starts telling the story of what God has called him to do. And he starts telling it to people in a way that puts pressure on himself to actually get it done, but also relieves the burden from him being the sole hero of the story. He tells a king who has finances and access to timber. He goes back to Jerusalem and he tells people who have time and energy and strength to actually help him build the wall. He starts telling other people and taking the pressure off of himself. The pressure sure is on now that he's testifying to what God is telling him to do, but he doesn't have to be the hero to put it all together. Other people start joining him in this goal, in this vision. And he doesn't have to provide out of nothing anymore. Other people start catching up to his goal and his dream. And when he goes and he tells them, this is what I think God wants us to do, you can imagine that moment of silence has got to be terrifying. Oh man, this is a big, audacious, God-sized plan. What are they going to think? They're going to think I'm crazy. And their response is so much different than that. The people of Jerusalem say, let's start rebuilding. They catch the vision and they catch the dream. And they join in with him in wanting to do this. How often, when God is calling us to something, or even when we just simply have a goal of our own, a New Year's resolution, a desire to get healthier, something like that, how often do we tell ourselves, this is what I want to do, and then hold it to ourselves, and we just churn on the story in our inner life? And we see other people doing well and thriving and winning and doing big things for God and doing little things for themselves, and we think, I can't even get started. But Nehemiah's big secret in chapter 2 is he took the audacious risk of starting to tell the story to others. And others responded by helping him. Not telling him he was a kook, not telling him that's way too big of a dream. They started by saying, we want to share this burden with you to help the dream God has given you come to life. This is a step we skip all too often. We don't want to tell others about what our goals are because it's scary and we might be held to account for them. So we hold them in ourselves. But Nehemiah would never get this wall built without the help of others. At some point, he had to go to the king. At some point, he had to go back to Jerusalem. He had to tell others. And others joined in. Now look, the barriers more or less remain the same. It's still going to be expensive. He's in Jerusalem now, but opposition is going to arise. He's still stuck in that not a single piece of the wall has been built. There's still comparison. There's still loneliness in leadership. But he's got help now. And now the barriers aren't his alone. He's got people joining in with him to help him overcome the barriers. Now, what happens at this point in the story if instead of telling others, Nehemiah just leans on the normal excuses that we all have? What happens then? Think about what the normal excuses might be. Nobody else had an exile. Where are we going to get this money from? The other nations' capitals already have walls. Who's actually going to build this wall? If he just leans on the normal excuses, it's not going to go anywhere. Instead, he doesn't lean on the excuses, and he begins to take steps. And his first step is telling others. Now, we live in a social media world. Imagine this story happening in a social media world, where Nehemiah is like Instagramming himself all the way through the desert, walking back, Instagramming pieces of wall being built. How would we look at this story today in an Instagram world? We would probably judge from the outside and say, man, he's doing great. He's got a verve that I just don't have. Wow, look at this. Must be nice if the king of Persia helps finance this thing. I can't even get my grandma to send me $10 for my birthday. Right? We tend to watch from the outside and we construct narratives that the goals of others are easier than the problems we have before us. We believe that others have advantages that we don't have. And in this social media world, we are taught to compare. And when we compare, we almost always decide other people are more blessed than we are. They have more fun, they have better vacations, they have more money, they have a happier family. These are the sort of things we think. Because when we just get quick pictures into other people's lives, we don't get the full story of the struggles that they've had to get to that moment. We all know our own struggles. We all know the barriers that we have overcome. Not one of us tells the story of our life to new friends without telling them about the tensions and the pains that we've had along the way. We want other people to know that we have overcome incredible hardships, even if our hardships are just medium in the grand scheme of things. We want people to know that we haven't had life handed to us. But on the other hand, we believe that everyone else has had it easy. We believe that other people have overcome very little. And it must be nice to have life as easy as they have it. We want to believe we've overcome mountains to get where we are. But we tend to believe that other people don't have the tension in their own story that we do. Nehemiah truly overcomes a lot in this story. And to illustrate this, I want to show you a video of one of the most big stars in the world right now, Brie Larson. She's a Best Actress, Academy Award winner for the movie Room. She's in the Marvel movies as Captain Marvel. And she tells a story about becoming an actress and how hard it could be in just this quick video. And I want you to see, like we see the glamour of Hollywood and think, oh, must be nice to be that wealthy and that beautiful, and on and on and on and on and on. But we don't see the struggle and the hurt. So check out her quick testimony video about being an actress.
I remember when I was 12 or 13, I auditioned for this movie, Hearts in Atlantis. I wanted it so bad, and it was down to me and another girl for it, and she got it, and I ran away from home. My move was my Easter basket that had a blanket and Cheez-Its. And I didn't have shoes on, I only had socks, and it was raining, and I ran. I basically just ran around the block and I came back. Yeah, I felt a lot of shock over that. And the other thing too, when I think about, gosh, like my little self, when I was in school and I didn't have a cell phone, it was horrible. So I'd go and like test for a TV show and you're waiting to hear back. And I'd go to school and have to wait all day at school and not know if I was getting the job or not. I gave up a lot, and I was definitely a weirdo as a kid because of it. It was tough. And then when I got older, it was different. It was a different kind of pain because it was like my survival. It was my livelihood, and it was my dream. And up until I was 18, it didn't bother me so much. I mean, the rejection sucked, but I felt like I had time. Once I was 18, I was like, am I supposed to be in college? Or like, what am I supposed to be doing? And I am a loser. I got told no 98 to 99% of the time. I know that's like hard to like fully wrap your brain around. It's even hard for me to wrap my brain around to think of the fact that I've been on like thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of auditions. It's sort of crazy. It's mind-numbing to me, but I'm grateful for it because I felt like it gave me more reps. It gave me more opportunities to refine my craft. And when you're auditioning a lot, you start to get good, or at least I did. I got a lot better at memorizing really quickly, thinking on my feet, taking direction, dealing with bad direction. Oof, you know, I started to learn, like, once I was in my teens, I was like, wait, just because I'm auditioning for the director doesn't mean that they know what they're doing at all. And so I found if I came in and I brought myself and I brought what I did, I always ended up where I was supposed to be. I always got the job that I was supposed to get. It was only when I lied, when I tried to be somebody for somebody else, act a certain way, that then you show up on set and you're just like, oh my God, I don't gel well with this director or with this cast or with this group of people because I just like lied to get here.
Got me when she's like, I failed 98% of the time. I mean, she's like as glamorous and wealthy and famous as it gets. I failed 98% of the time. So why do I tell you all this in closing? Nehemiah starts telling people about his dream, and things get going when other people join in. And we can often get in this posture where we don't think we can tell other people because they won't understand or they won't join in. But the truth of the matter is no matter how good someone's life looks on Instagram, they've had trials and struggles. And so admitting where you're stuck, telling other people about your dreams, being in the middle and not getting anywhere, you may find real power in just finding someone to tell your story to, because they might understand more than you can possibly realize. Because we've all had burdens and trials and struggles. We've all had dreams that we've achieved and dreams that we've fallen short of. And if we keep telling ourselves that no one will understand, or this is on me, or this is my problem, means that we're not opening other people to be a blessing in our life, or to be a voice of wisdom and a voice of help. And one of the things that the church should be, it seems to me, reading the scripture over and over and over and over, is communal, together, helping each other. And if you have some sort of goal or dream, or your life is in ruins and it needs a complete and utter restart, we have this way of pouring shame upon ourselves, saying that we have unique trials that are embarrassing. But so often the truth of the matter is that the people around you will understand your trial and struggle far more than you understand when you keep it to yourself. The help is out there, and it may be closer to you than you realize. But Nehemiah's step towards building the wall, it started with prayer, and that's a really spiritual thing. But the second chapter is a little less spiritual, but it's every bit as much the people of God. And that is starting to share my burden with others, to find that God will provide people to come alongside with wisdom and practical solutions to help. There are people in this room that you might think are way better than you, way further out in front of you, that wouldn't understand the trials and struggles of your life. But the truth of the matter is that most of us will understand intimately. We may not be struggling today, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't in your shoes in 1995 or 2010 or 1974. And maybe there's wisdom to share. Maybe there's help in carrying the burdens. Maybe actually opening up our lives to other people and to say, this is what God is doing in my life, isn't an instrument of shame, but an instrument of support and help. Nehemiah's step 2 is audacious. He starts telling people, and one person after another steps up in some way, shape, or form, big and small, to help. Not to say, dude, you're the cupbearer to the king. How are you going to journey 1,000 miles and build a wall? No one talks like that to him. And my experience in the church is that that's not typically how people talk to each other. When we open and share our burdens and our calls and our hurts and our goals, people step up to help. Let's not be a people who hold in our hurt or our fears or our dreams. But instead, let's learn a lesson from Nehemiah. A step along the way is opening ourselves up and seeing that the people of God can help each other. And so as we close today, we're going to sing a final song. I'm going to invite you to stand as we sing this final song as well. But maybe, we had communion last week. Maybe there is a step of prayer that you need to give you the courage to see God's dream and call upon your life. Maybe you need to do the work of confession from last week. Maybe you need to just get courage to take the next step in rebuilding your life. But the altar is open. You're welcome to use it as you seek God's direction in whatever He's calling you to. Would you sing this final song with me?